Field notes. Ah, man. Today, I was really talking about this idea of transformation, self transformation, and my voice. Like, what do I want this voice to be? And I mean, the more I was thinking about it, the more I was thinking about how this experience, even writing this thing, has changed me and has changed me personally. And that's how field notes have changed me personally because I feel like now I can really talk about this thing in a way that is healthy. And previously to now, I wasn't able to talk about being Jar Jar Binks in a way that I felt gave me strength or gave me any type of positive feeling when moving forward. And I've said this a ton of times before. I've been running away from Jar Jar Binks for a long time, and a lot of it is because of what was said and the backlash, but a lot of it was also because of my own perception of who I am and who I was and who I want to be. I always wanted to be a character actor that no one really knew. You know, I've always loved those character actors who could disappear into roles, right? The guys who can like play a thing and you're like, oh, snap. Like, oh, I can't believe that was him. Like, well, growing up, Eddie Murphy in Coming to America was always great to me because he played all of those characters. But when the thing that I remember being a kid going, oh, that's Eddie Murphy. Oh, that's Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy. But at the end, when you saw that he was also the old Jewish dude, that was Eddie Murphy. That's what blew me away. And I remember since a kid, even like going doing improv, coming up in the improv world, I always loved like different characters, different voices, falling into different body types and body moves. And the funny thing is like, be careful what you wish for because that's exactly what Jar Jar was. Jar Jar was the epitome of that. And rather than hiding behind makeup, I was in a rubber suit, and it was CGI. One of the reasons Michael Jackson didn't do Jar Jar, other than the fact that he was Michael Jackson, from what George told me, was because Michael wanted to do it with makeup. I'm calling him Michael like I knew him. I met him once. But George didn't want to do Jar Jar with makeup. He really wanted to do him CGI, and Michael wanted to do makeup and all this other stuff. Like he was Michael Jackson. But I'm glad he didn't do makeup because it pioneered and opened the door for this new possibility. And so it transformed me in a way that I was able to be that character actor that I always wanted to be. I might have actually, it might have been too believable because all of a sudden the backlash happened and none of us was expecting it. So I'm embracing now the fact that I was that character actor that I've always wanted to be. And that's why Jar Jar was so successful, was I was able to play a character, and I played that character. I think I played it well. George thinks I played it well. At the end of the day, it really is about what George thought because it's his movie. The other thing is this. I'm not going to get into the business of speaking out of turn or being a voice that I'm not, an authority at. But I am going to talk about George in the show. And I'm going to talk about the team that put Jar Jar Binks on the map in the show. Because it wasn't just me, and I keep saying this. No CGI character in any movie is just one person. It's not. And even video games, no video game character is just one person. There's an army of people bringing that character to life. So when you comment on that character, that's a lot of people's work. And I really want to drive that information home. Like, I really want folks to know that there are a lot of creative people behind Jar Jar. And then there were a lot of hurt feelings behind the backlash because intentions were true. Unfortunately, the actor either gets the accolades or the criticism. And that's what happens. That's the actor gets it. That's part of being the actor. And the director gets it. And I have to say that from what I saw, from what I've seen, George was just as hurt as I was. And it changed him fundamentally. And look, I don't have to defend George Lucas. George has a lot of people that did defend him, shielded him, sheltered him from all of this criticism, and part of that is a problem for me because everybody jumped to defend him so much that they left me out there in the wind. And I was as a 26-year-old at that time, being left out there alone was tough. George was not 26, and George had an entire company behind him, and I didn't have a manager, I didn't have an agent, I didn't have anybody. Still don't. But I understand why everybody defended him at Lucasfilm and at 20th Century Fox because George is paying the bills. George is the boss, and in order for him to keep producing, he has to be in a positive mental state that would keep him creative. But after Phantom Menace, he had to go back and do Clones and Sith, and he hadn't started writing Clones yet or Sith. He did Phantom Menace. He put all his time in Phantom Menace, and then he had to go write. And it was difficult for him to write. It's difficult for anybody to write with that much weight and that much pressure on them. I mean, I'm trying to write this, and I'm like, what am I? I can't imagine what George was going through having to write this movie where people's families depend on him. And with the Jar Jar backlash, he was coming out of a 20-year hiatus, and he was insecure. And there were all of these things out there that were just like, does he have it? Can he still do it? He didn't direct Empire and Jedi. I'm sure there's a lot of ego in there. There was a lot of experimentation. And the good thing about George Lucas is, and this is what I learned from him, one of the many things I've learned from him was, big risk, big reward. Like, if you're going to stick your neck out, stick it out, way out. And to be 100, I wasn't all in the beginning. One of the first days of shooting, I have to throw my hands up in the air in jubilation and say, "We's are going home!" Right? And I hated it. I was like, "We's are going home." I don't want to say this. It's just, I just thought it was just mad corny. And I had just had a hard time just committing to the thing. It was like early on. And McGregor comes over to me and he goes, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "Yo, this "we are going home" line, like, it's mad corny. Like, I don't know if I can. Is there another way I could do this? Like, and Ewan was so generous. Everybody was so generous. Ewan was so generous. He was just like, "Yes, Ahmed doesn't talk like that, but Jar Jar does." And I was like, "Man, Ewan, you just hit me with the one to grow on. Like that, you are 100% correct. It's not my job to judge this line. It's just my job to do it." That was one of the first days where I just threw myself in and I was just like, I don't care how corny or silly or stupid any of this stuff might be. I am going to do it because that's my job. I've always believed, Ben Kingsley once said, "My job as an actor is to make the line work." I agree with that. I think my job as the actor is to make the line work. And there are a lot of subtleties that go into making the line work. But, and I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds about method and my method of acting specifically. That's another show. But Ewan was right. Ben Kingsley was right. So everything in that movie and all of those movies was a vision and it was an idea and it was a dream created by George Lucas. And the backlash affected him. It affected us both because I wasn't Jar Jar. We were Jar Jar. We are Jar Jar. And George really likes kids and he wanted to appeal to kids, which is why he did Jar Jar. And one of the other many of the other things, but one of the other many things that I've learned from George was to think 20 years, 30 years into the future. When the backlash happened, George called me and I was walking through Washington Square Park in New York. And he called me and he was like, 20 years from now, this is going to be a different story because the kids who love Jar Jar are going to grow up and they're not going to understand why there was a backlash in the beginning at all. And he was right, you know. All those millennials out there, you saved me because you were the kids, and you grew up loving Jar Jar as your first experience into Star Wars. I love children, and I was just so over the moon about the kids loving Jar Jar. And now they're adults, and now you've grown up, and now it is different. You do see Jar Jar differently. George told me that was going to happen. But I think a lot of it was also like him healing himself too. And he had to go through a transformation, a self transformation, and find himself as well. I think that's why you haven't seen a lot of George Lucas movies recently. We are Jar Jar. It affected us. So, as much as I'm hurt by the machine of Lucasfilm not backing me as much as I needed, I'm not going to say they didn't, but they didn't back me as much as I needed, which is, hire me as something other than Jar Jar, of course. George had to go through, we went through the backlash. We went through the Jar Jar backlash, and I think we're coming out of it now. And I'm going to speak on that in the show. I think who we are now, in hindsight, we can look back and genuflect on that. We are Jar Jar. I think that's the shirt. I think that's the t-shirt. We are Jar Jar.